On this episode of Technicolor Blood, more fallout from Bryan Singer's indiscretions.
And we get a little background information on the Black Widow movie.
Starts right now on Technicolor Blood. Welcome back to Technicolor Blood. We are back again with another episode. Happy to talk to you guys today. My name's Chris. As always, I'm joined by Terrence. Terrence, how are you this week?
I'm doing pretty good. I usually am. And this week I'm doing that way as well.
Fantastic. All right, we got a lot to cover. We got some interesting trailers to talk about this week. So let's just jump into it. We always start out with something that we've recently watched in the last week or so. And we each have something this week. I'll start us off. I watched a true crime documentary on Netflix called Abducted in Plain Sight. Have you heard or seen anything about this?
Zero.
Okay, there was a little bit of chatter on my timeline, on my Twitter timeline about this recently, at TechBlood Pod on Twitter, and so I figured maybe it might blow up. It hasn't been like crazy, but there's some things in here that I thought were pretty interesting. So, Abducted in Plain Sight it's an hour and a half long or so documentary. It's not one of those 10 episode commitments that there's so many of on Netflix.
Right.
And it basically is about a couple of families back in the 70s who became very close to each other, and the father and the mother of one family, their kids all hung out together, and the father started getting very close to the mother and father from the other couple, and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. This actually isn't funny at all, but this man ended up kidnapping and molesting one of their children twice, and it basically happened right in front of them. To go into too much detail about this would give away a lot, so I can't really get into why I have just revealed that this happened 2 times, and basically it happened with everyone aware that he was taking this child away. I mean, if that doesn't intrigue you to find out how it happened, I don't know how else to do it. But I will draw one strange parallel to a recent documentary we talked about on Netflix, which was the Fire documentary. Mm-hmm. And in that documentary, there was that moment where we find out how, the one guy involved with the project has a creative way of helping save the project, at least at the time they thought save the project, by acquiring drinking water for everyone who's going to be at the show. Right. So that was quite a moment in that documentary where you just sort of look at the person you're watching it with and your jaw drops.
Yeah, that's definitely the part of it that caught fire, if you will, on social media.
Yes. So this one has a similar moment.
Okay.
And I really don't want to give it away. I would say this: if this was one of those 10 episode docuseries things, there's no way I would get through more than a couple of episodes. But as it's only a 90-minute, 2-hour long commitment, it's really not much. It's very intriguing. It's very interesting how it all pans out. They do a good job of sort of setting things up to where you're thinking, I could see this happening to me. I could see this happening to, someone if I was this close to another family. And then they start sort of revealing more things that they held off on revealing at the beginning of the documentary. Mm-hmm. And then you just realize you're watching the most gullible, stupid people in the history of filmed entertainment. So yeah, again, it's so new. I don't want to spoil anything, but I'd say, if you like true crime stuff and you have an hour and a half to kill, then it's worth checking out.
Okay. Well, I'm not that guy, so I don't think I'll be checking it out.
All right. Why don't you tell us about what you've seen this week?
Okay. So I went back and caught up on a movie from last year that I had missed out on, and that was The Incredibles 2, a sequel to the hit Pixar movie from a few years ago, directed by Brad Bird. I think he went off and maybe took a stab at doing some live action stuff in the interim. Regardless, Incredibles 2 is mildly entertaining. It's a far cry from the original. I was kind of surprised at how just dull the movie is. Like an enormous amount of its 2-hour running time is spent just watching the mom be a superhero while the dad mopes around
right.
for huge chunks of time.
Kind of the opposite of what they set up that entire series of movies to be.
Yeah, it's a bizarre kind of right turn out of nowhere for that series. Clearly, no one ever anticipated it becoming a series, and they really didn't know what to do to follow up with it. Mm-hmm. If you're a big fan of the second one, obviously, you should probably check this one out if you haven't already. If you don't really remember the first one, or you're really only interested in catching the best of the best when it comes to kids animated movies, I would say this is a pretty easy pass to take. Visually it looks great. The quality of animation is huge. The lighting, as always with Pixar films, is head and shoulders better than almost any other animated films on the market. So there are definitely sequences where you're just sort of blown away by what it looks like visually. Mm-hmm. But outside of the technical aspect of the film, there's really not too much to recommend for it. It's not the worst 2 hours of your life. It is entertaining in its own way. I just thought it was such a far cry from the first one that I would not really be able to recommend it to someone.
Yeah, the way I sort of view movies, I think has evolved for me over the years. And I ascribe a lot more to how much I think about a movie after I see it than I used to. Mm-hmm. And this is one that I saw in the theater when it came out, and I enjoyed it when I was watching it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's an animated movie. I'm not exactly the target audience for that, and I wasn't dying to see it, but I wanted to see it, so we did, and I enjoyed it in the moment, but it instantly left my mind. Yeah. So I think the older I've gotten, the more weight I put on how much I think about a movie after I've seen it, and it sort of increases how I feel about it if I think about it a lot afterwards, even if it's sort of in a negative way. At least I'm thinking about the movie. Sure. Yeah. But this is one that I sort of instantly forgot, so I tend to agree with that. I thought if you love the first one, it's worth seeing, but beyond that, it was just kind of a ho hum experience for me. Yeah. Well, it was a ho hum experience for me after I saw it, which to me says more than how I actually felt when I saw it. So right, yeah. If that makes any sense. Let's jump into some news and development news this week. So the big story this week seemed to be all the controversy, quote unquote controversy, about the Academy Awards presentation and the fact that they were pulling off certain awards to be given out during the commercial breaks, that they weren't going to air live, and the constant disclaimer for award shows. Neither of us are big award show fans, so we're not exactly upset about this. But I will pick at the Academy a little bit here. Now they've righted the wrong. Now over the course of the week, they said they were going to not show live the awards for cinematography, film editing, live action shorts, makeup, hairstyling. I think those are all the categories they were going to put during they were going to give out during the commercial breaks. And then a lot of filmmakers, directors, actors, quote unquote, protested, and I don't know what that means, other than putting their name on a letter and sending it to someone, tweeting loudly about something. Yeah, I don't know what they think protest means, but that ain't it. Anyway, so long story short, the Academy reversed course on this and put all the stuff back in the show. It's going to be live. So I still think they deserve to be called out a little bit on this, specifically for a couple of these. So cinematography, to not recognize cinematography live, that is criminal to me. I mean, that is one of the few awards that if I do happen to tune in during an Oscar telecast, that's one I'd like to see. That's so important to, obviously, the final look of a film, and even more so, not as far as the final look of the film, but film editing. I mean, is there another medium where editing is as vital to the medium than film? Yeah. Does it exist without a film? Right. I mean, cinematography, you can say that comes from photography. Mm-hmm. Editing is unique to motion pictures. And it just blows me away that this was one that they were just going to sort of put to the side. So I guess in the context of those artists being recognized for their work, it's good that it came back. But at the same time, again, it's an award show, and at this point, I'm even going to watch the Oscars less than I normally would, which is not at all, because it's just going to be a series of bad jokes, making jokes about all the controversy that has been going on for the last few months. The endless Kevin Hart jokes, the endless jokes about these things being pulled off. And then when these people come up to accept their awards, the ones that weren't originally going to be live, they're all going to make some kind of a comment about it. You know, there's a lot better ways if they want to shorten up the telecast that they could do that. They could cut out that speech that I guess the president of the MPAA makes every year, who no one knows who the hell that guy is.
Right. Yes.
No one cares what he says. They could cut out some of the, I think they spend a pretty good amount of time from the times I've seen, you know, parts of the telecast over the years. They could cut out some time showing extended clips of the movies, since we already know what we're here for.
Right.
I mean, there are ways to shorten it, but they don't seem to be interested in that. So I don't know what's going on with that. It's crazy how much controversy there's been this year. And usually this time of year, the controversy is always about, you know, diversity in the Oscars. Mm-hmm. And this year it's just all this other stuff.
Yeah. It's clear that, you know, the people who run the Oscars they're trying to make changes because of the, you know, slowly reducing number of viewers year after year. Yeah. And they're trying to fix that somehow, but every change they try to make, people lose their minds over. So clearly tons of people who don't bother watching the Oscars love chiming in about decisions that the people running the Oscars are making.
Guilty.
The thing I'd like to talk about is how everyone is so stupid. All right. So just to clarify, everything that you've heard about this, including everything you just said, is not true, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and this is what drives me nuts, right? So you're right in that they decided that they were not going to air these categories live, but they were never taking them out of the broadcast, right? They were going to shoot it while a commercial break was happening. Then they were going to edit it live in a truck and still include it in the broadcast of the show. No one watching it, if they never said this publicly, no one watching it would ever have had any idea that something different was going on in the show. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot by even bringing it up. And obviously people who didn't quite understand or more than likely just read a headline about it without ever reading the actual article.
Guilty again.
Right. Decided to get
because I don't care about award shows. That's why. That's why I only read the
fair
headlines.
Enough. All right.
At least I'm open about it, I guess.
So I you know, again, I don't care about award shows either. So you know, who cares?
Except for defending
if
them.
This goes bad or whatever. Well, I just wanted to kind of clarify.
No, it's the truth.
What was actually happening here?
But still, I mean, they made the decision for those categories to be the ones. I'd rather them do that with the actor awards personally.
Okay.
I care more about the technical achievements than I do the acting performances because, as Alfred Hitchcock said, actors are cattle.
Well, he never said they were cattle. He said they should be treated like cattle.
Now you're going to argue with me over what Alfred Hitchcock said. Okay.
Well, regardless, the vast majority of people tuning in are doing it to look at the pretty dresses, not to find out what geek did something to make a movie slightly longer than it needed to be.
Fair enough. All right. Okay. So next thing I have on my rundown here is I saw what I thought was an interesting article that I actually read the article for about A Star Is Born. And Terrence, you know, if you've read something different, please let me know.
I will.
So apparently there was some consternation over the way the current version of A Star Is Born was going to end. I don't know. Maybe this is only interesting to me because I kind of took issue with a little bit of how the movie ended. So spoilers. If you haven't seen A Star Is Born yet, the original movies sort of end the same way anyway. But as we know, at the end of the movie, the star, Jackson Maine, played by Bradley Cooper, commits suicide by hanging himself in his garage. And I liked the movie a lot. It actually hit my top 5 before I saw 8th grade. But I just didn't feel like the movie sort of naturally earned that ending.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back and listen to previous episodes to find out exactly how we felt about that. I won't go into it here. But so because of that, I thought it was interesting that apparently they had gone through some discussions about how to end it. So the original way back when ended with the actor who was the main character walking into the ocean. Mm-hmm. The Chris Christopherson one ended with him getting in a car accident, and it was sort of ambiguous as to whether or not it was a suicide or not. And I had never seen the one from the 70s.
Right.
And that's kind of the way that I complained about how I think the new one should have ended.
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand why, because it just would have been a straight ripoff of the one from the 70s.
Okay.
So I would have definitely preferred that. Now the producer didn't reveal, in the article I read, the producer didn't actually reveal what other ideas they had on the table. But I just thought it was interesting that apparently they had a bit of a row about it, And in the end, Bradley Cooper got his. It was his decision for how it ended. So Cooper is the one that wanted to end the movie the way it did. And I feel like I'm kind of the only person who had a problem with it for the most part. So it is what it is. Can't complain. It's, going to be up for Best Picture. Hugely popular movie. I just thought it was kind of interesting that apparently that was a fight. And I would have felt a lot better about my opinion on it if, similar to me only reading headlines, I had actually watched the one from the 70s and seen that that's, in my brain, how I felt like the last one should have ended.
It seems like a weird decision to remake a movie, but then be like, well, we don't want to do the exact same ending, so we're going to change the ending to this movie that we're remaking.
Right.
Like, if you're not happy with how it ended, then why not make a completely original film?
Right, yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like since A Star Is Born came out, and this is sort of a side discussion we can have real quick on this. Since A Star Is Born has come out, similar to Bohemian Rhapsody, I feel like there's been this like weird backlash about how once they got nominated for Best Picture, people start talking about how, these are fine movies, but they don't deserve to be nominated for Best Picture, especially Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm kind of shocked at, honestly, the hate I see for that movie all over Twitter. And we've been through this before. We liked it a lot more than most people did. We liked it a lot more than a lot of critics did, which is kind of the opposite of how we usually work with movies.
That is very true.
But the disdain for that movie has it's kind of surprised me. And at the same time, these are the same people that I'm seeing saying that 2018 was such a great year for movies, which I just reject. I think I mentioned before it was a great year for good movies, but a bad year for great movies. So I don't really understand where that comes from, and that's also led to a lot of people starting to predict that Green Book is going to sort of swoop in from the side and take this Best Picture, which is a movie that I kind of chuckled at the trailer, but I didn't honestly have any interest in seeing that. Yeah,
that would be an unexpected win because that movie just seems, even among people who liked it, to be sort of a lukewarm appreciation.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the movies that people feel extremely strongly about are just going to sort of cancel each other out, and then the movie that nobody feels particularly strong about might just swoop in and win Best Picture.
Yeah, I still think Roma probably has a really good chance to kind of sneak in.
But that's another movie that, like you said, after it was nominated, I feel like people started coming out of the cracks and saying, oh, it's really not that good.
Yeah, there's that kind of criticism that it's a passion project, which is totally true.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still great.
It makes you wonder how many people don't even formulate an opinion until after a movie is nominated because they haven't bothered to see the movie until it was nominated.
Yeah, and hell, I've been guilty of that in the past too.
Sure,
so
yeah.
We all have. All right, so another story that we've talked about, I don't know, a few weeks back, we discussed this sort of ridiculous notion that, Bryan Singer has been attached to Red Sonja and he's still set up, and obviously that was never going to happen. They didn't even have a cast attached. No one's going to be in a Bryan Singer movie right now. No one of any note.
Sure.
So officially, Red Sonja is now on the back burner. And I don't know why they stopped short of just firing him from the project, because there's probably other directors out there that could direct this movie.
I know Robert Rodriguez was attached to it for a couple of years.
Really? Yeah. Well, but this could be. I don't really understand their trepidation with just firing him. Because I think there's I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where they're still waiting for things to play out legally,
right? So
they don't want to put themselves in any hot water. And I keep saying they. It's slipping my mind which studio had this one set up. I don't know if it was I want to say it was Paramount for some reason, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, so that's finally gone on the back burner. It seems like the kind of project that there would be some excitement for, since we're just in the middle of this long, unending remake cycle right now, and this is one of the lesser known ones from the 80s,
right?
But I mean, this is, for instance, like this is the kind of project that I think like a Zack Snyder would be perfect for. Even though I'm not a big fan of his, it's the kind of movie that he could direct just fine, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think actually now that you mention that, he's sort of the perfect choice for that.
Yeah, so I feel like they just need to move on, cut the cord. I mean, even without a legal precedent, I feel like they could say, we're not going to be able to cast anyone with Bryan Singer as the director, so we can't make this movie in its current form. It also makes me wonder if there's just something contractually already in place that Singer has that's keeping them from doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, the way Hollywood uses euphemisms, it's possible that back burner is just the code word that everyone else in the industry knows as this movie is done.
Yeah, it's dead, and it's just going to be one of those like long, slow death things.
Yeah.
And eventually maybe they'll throw another director on it. Okay, I have one more item before we're gonna go into Terrence's portion of the news here. So this past week, I guess there were some stills circulated on the internet of Will Smith in Aladdin.
Yes, there were. Yeah, I think Entertainment Weekly published some photos.
Yeah, so Will Smith is playing Aladdin in the live action remake. And is it? I assume it's one of those. They say live action, but it's one of those that's going to be, they're actors, but everything else is CG. Anyway,
probably.
So Will Smith is the genie in this, the Robin Williams character from the animated version, which is beloved. And people did not react well to this at all. And that's fine. But my question is, either you didn't expect that the genie was going to be blue, or you didn't expect that a blue Will Smith was not going to look ridiculous.
Well, so here's the thing. The first photo that came out he was not blue.
Oh,
it was just Will Smith in the costume. And people didn't understand. And then Disney had to come out and say, no, don't worry. We'll digitally make him blue in the movie. He's going to be blue.
Okay.
And people still didn't quite understand. So Disney had to rush out these photos to Entertainment Weekly to show people this is what he's going to look like. He will be blue.
Whoops.
And that didn't help. Like, people were just like, well, this looks stupid.
But it's Will Smith and he's blue. I don't understand what people expected.
Yeah, whatever you're picturing at home, it's 100% that.
Right.
That's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, I saw the original. I don't remember it very well. So,
yeah.
I know that's like one of the, if you ask a bunch of people what their favorite all-time Disney movie is, there's 7 or 8 answers probably that you're going to get out of the hundreds that they've made. And that's one of them. So I know it's a very beloved property that people feel very, very strongly about.
Yeah, and that is due almost exclusively to Robin Williams in that movie.
Those are tough shoes to fill.
Yeah, that's an unwinnable war, especially for a guy like Will Smith, right? He's not a comedian. He's not known for humor. He might pull it off. Obviously, there's going to be huge amounts of animation on his character. You'll probably see him as Will Smith very tiny amount of the time, and the rest of the time he'll be bouncing off the walls as different, animated characters and whatnot. But still, that's a tough one.
I wouldn't say that he's not known for humor, but he's definitely not the comedic powerhouse that you need to carry that role,
right,
which Robin Williams obviously was.
Has he done anything humorous since his television days?
Well, no. He's not known for roles in necessarily comedy movies, but he always brings his own brand of humor to every role he's in.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I mean.
You're right. Welcome to Earth.
Yes, I make this look good, like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
One more item here that I have. So we spoke real briefly recently about that upcoming Netflix movie, The Irishman, which is a Martin Scorsese directed, Robert De Niro starring movie that they've been trying to set up for years. Long story short, just on the back end of that, this is a movie that Scorsese and De Niro have been trying to get going for a long, long time. They couldn't get it anywhere. A lot of studios kept telling them no, or yeah, but we want to do this, and yeah, but we want to do that. And Netflix came along and said, you can do whatever you want, and gave them a pile of money, which I think, to me, is the most interesting thing about this, because we're just going to see more and more of this where there are big-name directors going to Netflix, which is crazy to me, but I think this is going to start happening more and more. Anyway, I think also when we talked about it the last time, there was a little bit on how they're going to be doing some de-aging technology in this movie. Mm-hmm. So the cast in this movie, it's the greatest hits of Martin Scorsese. It's got De Niro, it's got Joe Pesci, it's got Harvey Keitel, and a couple of others, much older guys. So there's been a little bit more detail about how this is going to work. Apparently the entire first half of the movie is going to be told in flashbacks. So they're committing to this thing. This is almost becoming a bit of an experiment. Hopefully not a train wreck, but something that I'm not going to be able to look away from. I already want to see it because I like mob movies, and it's Scorsese. He's obviously long past his prime, but I'm a fan.
Sure.
And in these kind of roles, maybe sometimes I feel like maybe De Niro will give a shit a little bit more, when he's not playing, Meet the Parents 12 or whatever.
It would be nice to see what it would take to get De Niro to give a shit a little more.
For sure. Maybe this is it. So the whole first half of the movie, apparently, these guys are going to be aged, and from what I read a couple of months ago, it seemed plausible because they were only going to de-age them about 20 years or so. Now I'm reading that late 20s Robert De Niro from The Godfather 2 is going to be involved in this movie somehow. So
all right,
this is the effects are going to be done by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. So they obviously have top tier powerhouse company doing this. And they are using footage from the older movies that these guys have been in over the years, not to copy it, but to have reference points for how these guys are supposed to look.
Makes sense.
Which is interesting. And I'm as curious about the technical achievement, the attempt at a technical achievement about this as I am with anything else with the movie. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work. You've got these guys who've been starring in these movies since the 70s, working together, in one way or the other, or in their own movies. And it's one thing to like work in a couple of flashbacks from a couple of quick things that happened 20, 40 years ago. It's quite another thing to have the first half of a movie extended scenes of having these guys de-aged,
right,
where they're actually playing themselves. And I don't know, I have no idea what that encapsulates. I don't know if they're going to be wearing green masks over their faces for the motion capture. I have no idea how it's going to work. It's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be hugely disconcerting, but I'm hoping that this is done well enough, and apparently Netflix is dumping enough money into it where it's not a concern, which is probably one of the things that Scorsese was running into problems with when he was shopping around to the traditional studios. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to come out. It is going to be released sometime in 2020, so we're still a ways away, but I'm going to be kind of making it one of my personal projects for the podcast to kind of keep an eye on news from this to see what other sort of technical related stories we see from it.
Right. That's interesting. My question is there something they can do for their voices? Because they sound old. Like, that was really distracting to me watching The Incredibles 2. Craig T. Nelson sounds so old in that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. There was nothing in the article about that, but I thought about that as well. If you don't think in your head that people sound too much different, when they get to the age that these guys are, they sound a lot different.
Yeah, it is noticeable.
So yeah, they must have a plan in place for that. I can't imagine they don't.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put my trust in ILM and Martin Scorsese and hope that this doesn't turn into something embarrassing.
Yeah, let's hope this isn't another Space Cowboys.
All right, Terrence, what do you have for us news-wise?
All right, well, I've got a couple topics that I'd like to bring up. And this first one is the kind of the kernel of the story is simply that Marvel has had to hire a new screenwriter to come in and do a complete rewrite for the Black Widow movie.
Uh-oh.
So coming up soon, Marvel is finally going to do a standalone movie for the Scarlett Johansson character, Black Widow. And they've brought in Ned Benson to do a complete rewrite of it, as I just said. The thing that's kind of more interesting for me about it is the story regarding this, written by Collider, kind of gives you an interesting insight into how Hollywood works in the background. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about it because I thought it was kind of a fascinating, like I said, glimpse into how things work. And an example of that is this screenwriter had originally written the script for The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, which stars Jessica Chastain, as a spec script for that TV series Blacklist.
Okay.
So that script never got produced, but somehow, whether the screenwriter showed it to the right person or someone else got it in front of Jessica Chastain, she was impressed by it. And so she asked him to expand it out and make it the first installment of The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby film series that she apparently stars in and produces for some, I believe, a streaming service. So that in and of itself is kind of interesting. And he's gone on to write 2 more of them, I think. So there's 3 of them written in all. And that's kind of interesting. So it's a little vague in that nobody knows for sure, but there's some speculation that, so Scarlett Johansson was maybe not attached to do an adaptation of a really successful series of articles that had been written for the Dallas Morning News. And those articles were called My Aryan Princess. And it involves this woman in Texas who infiltrates this white supremacist group and ultimately brings it down. And all of that's true. And those articles are apparently really amazing that this story happened. So obviously, when you have a story that compelling, someone wants to turn it into a movie. So that was being worked on, and this writer had been hired to do the adaptation of that. And Scarlett Johansson, people are speculating, was maybe at some point offered the lead role in that film, which it never went anywhere. Like she was never officially attached to it in any way, shape, or form. But people think that what probably happened was she was given a copy of this guy's script. She was so impressed by the screenwriting that when it came time to rewrite Black Widow, she was the one who brought it to Marvel and said, this is the guy that you need to have rewrite this movie for us. And that might be how he actually became attached to the project.
All about relationships, man.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of thing is super interesting to me.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. I'm also interested that they needed a ground up rewrite on the initial draft of that. That's
that part of it is a little concerning.
It's always strange to me when you hear something like that, because obviously, you know, they're not just going to say, hey, so-and-so writer, write this script, see you in 6 months. There's going to be discussion about it. They're going to get approvals. And there was so much disagreement about it, I guess, that they are literally tearing it down and building it from the ground up.
Right.
So it makes me wonder exactly how it works with a big studio picture, you know, something involved with Marvel. How often are they checking in on the screenwriters? How often are they required to turn in what they have so far? You know, if and there's no way that that's not the case. There's no way that they, unless it's like a big name screenwriter,
sure,
you know, that guy's going to do what he wants to do. But with this one, I don't think the person who penned the original draft is some massively, hugely successful, world famous screenwriter.
Right.
So I'm sure they were getting pages, and what ended up happening was at the end of this thing, they decided, no, we got nothing here. We're going to start over. That kind of blows me away that can happen with a Marvel movie.
It also kind of makes me wonder too, if the fact that Scarlett Johansson was the one who brought this guy in, if maybe she was the one that put the kibosh on the original screenplay.
Right, yeah.
She might have just been the only one who was unhappy with it, and she brought this guy in to write something more along the lines of what she was envisioning for what's essentially become her character.
Yeah, she spent all this time, and she actively had been wanting this movie to happen forever. This isn't one of those things where she was like, whatever, and we'll get around to it. She wanted this to happen. And so now it's finally happening, and she's got obviously tremendous leverage.
Absolutely.
So if that's what she wants, then that's what's going to happen.
It also strikes me as interesting that, considering how many Marvel movies have been made by now, that there isn't maybe one or two screenwriters that, you know, are so familiar with the universe and the writing style and what works that they just aren't always the go-to rewrite guys for the screenplays. The next interesting little bit of background information is Ben Affleck has finally said something regarding his decision to walk away from the Batman character.
Okay.
There's not a lot to say about it, but since we've kind of followed this story over the last year as it's developed, I thought I'd just like to put the period at the end of the sentence. Ben Affleck was on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Jimmy Kimmel asked him about it, and I'll just read you Ben's quote, and this is all he had to say about it, and so far this is all he said about it completely, and that was, you know, I tried to direct a version of it and worked with a really good screenwriter, but just kind of couldn't come up with a version, couldn't crack it. So I thought it was time to let someone else take a shot at it, and they got some really good people. And that's all he had to say about it. There's not a lot, I guess, to read into that other than it sounds like it was his decision to walk away from it.
Yep.
And it sounds like it was, you know, a legit creative decision, which is, you know, here's a character that's been adapted to film so many times that if you're a creative guy like Ben Affleck clearly is, you know, he's a talented director. There's no denying that. You know, for him, probably one of maybe the most important element was to be able to find something fresh to do with the character, and it just sounds like he couldn't find it. Yeah,
it's interesting that now I'm making the assumption that everything he said there is true, and I'm also making the assumption that it was his decision to walk away.
Right.
It's commendable to me that instead of hanging on to that, since he personally loves Batman and it's a dream for him to play that role, it's interesting to me that he gave up on it in really such a short window of time. It's not like it's been a huge ton of years. This kind of seems like the type of thing that normally would get hung up for years and years and years. And obviously DC wants to move forward, I mean, I think, with their next Batman picture. You know, I mean, kind of the way they've run their studio over the last couple of years doesn't really lead me to believe that they're as urgent as they should be with their main properties.
Right.
But in this case, it sounds like, you know, if he made the actual final decision, I mean, I think that's a good bit of self-awareness on his part. And it also speaks to the fact that, you know, he wants to move on to the next thing because, you know, he's obviously not done. He's, like you said, he's a very successful director. He's actually good at it. And I'm sure he wants to get moved on to the next thing. And I can't say this for a fact, but I mean, everything that I've read and heard about his time as Batman in these movies for DC is that he's personally hurt by how poorly received they were.
Right.
And I mean, there was that famous meme a couple of years ago from the first time he showed up as Batman, which I think was for Batman versus Superman. And he was sitting with Henry Cavill and they were doing an interview, and like the first thing out of the interviewer's mouth was something about how it had been so poorly received. And while Henry Cavill is talking, like Ben Affleck's face just completely falls. And I genuinely felt bad for him there because I could see his brain working there.
Yeah.
Because, I know it's easy to criticize and laugh at all these multi-million-dollar actors, and you don't feel bad for them. They have amazing lives and blah, blah, blah. But he cares about that. He cares about what he does. So I think not only from that famous meme, but just some of the stuff I've read over the years, he genuinely is saddened by the fact that it's not his fault, but it's kind of like these movies have been a bit of a punchline for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And let's not forget that his last directorial effort was that Live by Night, and that was very poorly received.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that, if he felt like he couldn't knock one out of the park with a Batman movie, then for him, who clearly moving forward, he wants to spend a lot more time on his directing career.
Yeah.
It makes sense for him to walk away from that and try to find something that's a guaranteed home run.
Yeah. I mean, he was on top of the world with Argo,
Sure.
That movie won Academy Awards and then he had, I think it was 2017 or maybe it was 2016. He appeared in 3 movies: Live by Night, Batman versus Superman, and The Accountant.
Oh.
And I challenge you to go find any big time famous actor who appeared in at least 3 movies, who was one of the main characters or the main character in a movie with 3 movies as bad as those. I mean, that is a punch in the gut year for him. Man. And he's ready to get back to where he, honestly, where he belongs, which is kind of more on top of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, moving on from that topic, here's something that's a little more fun, I think. We've kind of mentioned on the last few podcasts about an upcoming movie that we're both looking forward to, and that movie is the remake of the movie Dune.
Mm-hmm.
That's set for November 20th, 2020. That's the release date, and that's kind of the big news. But I was more intrigued by the list of actors who have now been signed on to star in this movie. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, because it's a heavy hitters list of people. So just to run down that list, the first name and the star who'll be playing Paul Atreides is Timothée Chalamet. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know his name, he's a real young guy, and he's only been in a handful of movies that you've probably seen. He was in that Hostels movie for Netflix that was instantly forgettable. He was in Lady Bird, but probably the role that he's most famous for is Call Me By Your Name, that love story with Armie Hammer.
Okay.
It plays the older man, and Timothy plays like the 17-year-old boy in the relationship.
Right.
And that got him a lot of critical praise. And now he's going to be the star of what's projected to be a $200 million science fiction epic. Some of the other names on this cast list, though, are Javier Bardem, Rebecca Ferguson from the Mission Impossible movies. I know you're a big fan of hers.
Huge fan of hers, yeah.
Stellan Skarsgård, Dave Bautista, who appeared in this director's previous film. Josh Brolin is attached. Oscar Isaac from the Star Wars movies. And the latest name that I've seen is Zendaya. Mm-hmm. She's the actress that you might know playing the love interest of Peter Parker in the Marvel version of the Spider-Man movies.
Okay.
And I believe she voiced a character in an animated movie not too long ago as well.
Okay.
But, yeah, so I mean, it's obviously going to be a big budget movie. It's epic. The number of characters in the novel is staggering, and it looks like they're lining up a lot of recognizable names to play all those characters, and I think that's kind of exciting.
Did you mention Josh Brolin?
Yes, I did.
Okay, there is one name that you left out that I think just came down yesterday, but I don't think it's official yet. He's in talks. Jason Momoa.
Yes, yeah, you're right. I did see that.
Yeah. So I mean. I feel like at this point we've already heard all the main big names, and it's just sort of filling the cast out, and then bam, they drop Jason Momoa on you.
Yeah, no kidding.
Which I'm very excited about, because as much as we did not like Aquaman, we're fans of Jason Momoa. So
man, when you look at a cast this big with this many big names, I have not seen this discussed yet, but instantly my brain starts thinking that there's no way this is going to be one movie. Like they're going to have to split this film into two movies.
I think that's a risk because the first one wasn't exactly a huge hit, right? I mean, it was popular, but it wasn't a huge hit.
No, it was a pretty substantial flop.
Yeah, like kind of famously.
Yeah.
And by a super famous director in David Lynch.
Yes.
So and this one, you keep mentioning the director, but you didn't say his name. I can't imagine why that is.
I'm not positive they've announced that. Have you heard something?
Shut up. You're trying to turn this back on me. You are good at this, you bastard.
Sounds like you know something.
Yeah, the guy that directed Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. That guy. His movies recently haven't been like major, huge hits. So it'd be quite a risk for them to film two for back-to-back release.
But so let me ask you this. To land these kind of names, right, they can't just be bit cameos, right? They have to be showing these actors,
right,
a legitimate reason to be in this film.
So you're thinking like the runtime is already just with these names. It's got to be 4 hours plus.
Well, exactly, right? So if you're looking at a screenplay that's going to equate a 3.5 hour long movie, as a studio, don't you just start thinking, listen, let's let them shoot some footage. Let's see what we're working with here. If it looks good, then let's just go ahead and break this into 2 movies and release them in consecutive years.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. I'm hoping with that cast that it will, the numbers that the first one could do would justify the second. I mean, if they shoot it, they're going to shoot it. It's going to come out no matter what.
Sure. Yeah.
So this is actually kind of got me charged up to watch the original again. I haven't seen it I think I was a kid when I saw it the last time.
Well, let me go on record as saying I love the original, but I also appreciate the fact that no one should ever watch it.
That's fair, but I mean, I remember it fondly. I just, I'm a huge David Lynch fan, and it doesn't really hit my like top 3 or 4 of his movies.
Yeah.
But I also like Kyle MacLachlan a lot, and Sting was very famously, boisterous in that movie. So I don't remember. Do you recall offhand sort of the range of the runtime of the original? I'm sure it's massive.
Well, yeah. So the theatrical run was just a little over 2 hours, but there was an extended version of it created for television that ran over 2 consecutive nights, and that is available on Blu-ray. Okay. So you can, with the Blu-ray, you get both versions of it. But I mean, if you're going to commit to watching it, you might as well watch the long one.
Well, do you have any idea if Lynch has blessed either version as his preferred?
I don't believe he has ever expressed anything positive about the extended version.
Okay. Well, that tells me all I need to know.
Yeah. But I mean, here's the thing. If you're a fan of David Lynch, you probably want as much Lynch as you can get. And there's a lot more Lynch in the extended version.
Okay. Well, in that case.
A lot of the weirdness got cut out from the theatrical cut.
Yeah, in that case, sign me up. All right, so you're really not going to say the director's name is what you're telling me.
David Lynch?
No, you're doing our listeners a disservice. I'm not informing them who the director of the new Dune movie is.
It's like I missed the Jason Momoa info, so I must have missed that. I'll look it up, and if I can find it, we'll tweet it out.
Okay, fine.
Okay,
we'll tweet it out. We'll tweet out a video of you saying it.
What? No, I don't. You can't tweet video. I don't think.
Let's talk about some trailers.
Trailer time.
Trailer segment. Okay. So the first one we have on the slate here is a movie called Ma. This stars Octavia Spencer, is directed by Tate Taylor, who also directed The Help. And he also directed a movie a couple of years ago called The Girl on the Train that starred Emily Blunt.
So let's just pause there for a second to think about how different these 3 films are.
Right.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, so Ma is a teen horror film, essentially, which to me, I mean, I'm definitely intrigued by it because it's just so odd.
The trailer is great.
Yeah, check the trailer out. Essentially, a group of kids are looking for a place to get high and get drunk. They're underage, obviously. And Octavia Spencer, of all people, runs into them at the convenience store and invites them back to her place to do their drinking and smoking or whatever they're going to do in her basement. They didn't really illustrate this in the trailer, but I assume under the guise of, I don't want you to do this stuff, but if you're going to do it in a place where I know you're safe, which is my basement, not just out somewhere. But,
sure.
But she's a stranger.
Yes.
So
there's no place safer than a stranger's basement.
Yeah, absolutely. That you met at the convenience store. So she allows them in their home. That's like the party place. And then over the course of the trailer, very dark things start happening. She's like possessive of them, and I guess that's why they call it Ma. She's like tracking them on social media. She somehow gets their phone numbers. She's contacting them. She's following them to school, and obviously some horrible stuff goes down. I'm super intrigued by this because I think they did a good job of taking they probably had I'm sure this is not how the movie was conceived, but I can see how you have this sort of typical horror script and you think, how can we make this different? Well, we'll cast the lead as, instead of some creepy dude or whatever, we're going to take this heavy set African-American woman, Octavia Spencer, and put her in the role because she seems about as non-threatening as anyone you could possibly imagine. And she looks genuinely terrifying in this movie.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the trailer.
The concept, if you just told me the concept, I would shrug and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm not a teenager, so I'm not interested in that movie. But knowing that this is coming from the director of The Help and Girl on the Train and stars a powerhouse actress like Octavia Spencer, that there's more happening in this movie than just a cheap teen slasher film.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hugely intriguing to me for that reason.
Yeah, you're going to have Octavia Spencer chewing a lot of scenery as someone who clearly is very disturbed, and I'm actually really excited about that because she is a very talented actress.
Yeah, that's a very different role for her.
Yeah. All right, so next one is a very anticipated movie, gotta be one of the early favorites for highest grossing movie of the year when it comes out, Frozen 2.
Oh yeah.
So I wasn't really a big fan of the original. I don't really get why it was so immediately legendary as a Disney movie, but I'm obviously not the target audience.
Sure.
So I defer to others' expertise in that. I assume you're probably in the same boat as I am. The interesting thing about the trailer to me is that they did a great job of making me forget that Josh Gad is in the movie.
Dude, I was about to say that this trailer is the most amazing thing you will ever see for Frozen 2, because this, I guarantee you, is the last thing that you will ever see that doesn't have Josh Gad in it. It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, and even during the trailer, there was a segment where the group was walking into a scary forest and they didn't have the little snowman dude with them. So I assume they're going to rescue him, or he was murdered, which would be amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is it okay? At Tech Blood, hit me up on Twitter. Hit us up on Twitter. What am I missing with Josh Gad? Someone needs to inform me.
Yeah. So that guy, okay, neither one of us get it with him, right? But what I especially don't get is how that one role as the snowman just catapulted his career through the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I will not understand. And no at no other time did I feel that shock than when I first saw the trailer to that Murder on the Orient Express.
Yes.
When they were going down this list of all these great actors.
Great actors.
Yeah,
yes.
Legendarily good, award-winning actors, talented, and they all get their little scene in the Murder on the Orient Express trailer where they have a line, and it's Johnny Depp, and I'm going to forget, this is bad, I shouldn't start naming names, but it's a bunch of big names. Yes. And then one of them is Josh Gad.
Yeah.
I had a visceral reaction to that. Okay, so, all right. The last one I found to be, I'll just tell you, I found this to be a delightful trailer. It's called Yesterday. This is Danny Boyle's next upcoming film. Danny Boyle, if you somehow don't know,
Oscar-winning director.
Slumdog Millionaire. He started out with Shallow Grave, which was a great one, and of course, Trainspotting is probably his number. Well, I don't know if it's his number one. It's my favorite of his. It's the movie that was most associated with him probably until Slumdog Millionaire came along. He did 127 Hours with James Franco. He actually got a good acting performance out of James Franco. I'll say no more. And so he directed this, and the crazy and amusing, and I think just the concept just makes me happy. It's set in a world where a young man gets some kind of an injury, and when he wakes from the injury, the world essentially is the same as it was, except the Beatles never existed. So he is just playing his guitar, he's playing some covers, and he impresses his friends, and they're all like, wow, that's amazing. When did you write that? And you can imagine how the rest of the movie goes. Just, the trailer itself tells you that he becomes, the biggest name in the history of music. blah, 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 blah. I'm intrigued by this. I love Danny Boyle. I'm a little surprised that he is directing this subject matter.
Yeah, it does not seem like a Danny Boyle film.
It does. I hate to use the phrase beneath him, but this kind of seems like a Netflix movie topic to me.
It's cute.
Yeah, it's cute, and that's fine. He can do cute stuff, but I don't know. I guess I want the filmmakers I love to, make more heavy subjects, more quote unquote important subjects, which is obviously ridiculous. They should all make whatever they want to make. So I'm just kind of surprised at the subject matter, but I'm definitely intrigued by it, and I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I don't think I reacted quite as positively as you did to it. So I guess the caveat for this film is that somehow the music that the Beatles wrote in the 60s would still be as popular if it was brand new today. And I mean, I think that is a concept that only appeals to people over a certain age. Like if the movie had been designed where he woke up in the 60s and there were no Beatles, then I would get it. I'd be like, okay, that's brilliant. But they keep showing these scenes of him playing 1960s pop songs in modern world, and people are losing their minds for it. And I mean, obviously it helps a little bit that this is set in London, right? So, who knows what the current state of pop music in London is, but the current state of pop music in, America today has moved so far beyond that, I mean, obviously, as we said earlier, this movie is just cute, so I need to turn my brain off. I shouldn't be thinking about any of this stuff, and I apologize for it.
I mean, Ed Sheeran's in it, for God's sake.
Yeah. Playing a dumb guy, so, But let's not forget, he ruined Game of Thrones, so I'm sure he won't help this movie.
That was your jump-off point with Game of Thrones. Huh?
Yeah, that was... He showed up on screen, and in the background, you can see the Fonz on water skis jumping over a shark.
All right. Well, I think that's probably a good place to end this week's episode. I'm looking forward to that. I like Danny Boyle. I can't argue with the logic, though, about the Beatles songs in current day. So
I mean, look, I'll see it. It's Danny Boyle. Sure. I'll see it. I'm sure it's as well made as any movie like that can be. So rock on.
Yeah. All right, guys. Appreciate you listening. You can hit us up on Twitter @TechBloodPod. Please leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to the show on. We'd really appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, and if you've heard who the director of Dune is, let us know.